aspects of the legislation from the 500s that can be looked at should anyone be interested. So this is the 600s too. So in that period, the situation in Spain became very troubled. And the Muslims from the Berbers and others obviously heard about this and realized that Spain was a real possibility, even though it was on the northern side of the Mediterranean. So Tariq was deputized by Ibn Nusayr to lead the campaign, and he didn't find much resistance. And the Muslim armies swept through Spain very easily because of the dissension there, because of the Visigothic king, Roderick, was not very popular among his subjects, and there were a lot of disillusioned subjects, and also Jews. And the rumors and the way a lot of people presented it is that as the Muslim armies advanced, because they didn't have huge armies, through Spain, they couldn't govern the place, they left Jewish governors behind in the towns behind them to govern the towns that they had conquered. So the Jews, to some extent, and the Muslims cooperated in the conquest of Spain in that regard. The Jews weren't the fighting people, but they were involved in administration to some extent. Which is why when the Spanish reconquered the place, 700 years later, their animosity turned against both Jews and Muslims, and they expelled both groups from Spain in 1492, the year Columbus set off for America. Columbus's voyages to America in 1492 were directly connected to the expulsion of the Jews and Muslims from Spain, and the institution in the process of the Inquisition, because the Inquisition was instituted in Spain to ferret out false Christians, Jews and Muslims who were lukewarm Christians who had converted because they were forced to, but were not really believers. And then the Inquisition was exported to the Americas to be applied to Indians and other people, unfortunately. But that was the original reason for the Inquisition, and so we're talking about 700 years later, Ferdinand and Isabella, the people that sponsored Columbus, and you may know about, they sponsored him because it was a commemoration of their unification of all of Spain. They had finally finished with the last Spanish Muslim principality, the principality around Granada, which had survived up until that time. And they expelled all of those, conquered that area, expelled all of the Jews, and in the process sponsored Columbus's trip to America, where a lot of these refugees were hoping to find shelter, and some of them did. A lot of Columbus's crew were the Jews, and his doctor and some of the other people on the crew. And some people say that Columbus himself was a pseudo-crypto Jew, although I don't think he was. But that's, no one knows. His background is clouded in mystery. Nobody knows where he came from, who he was, what was he doing in Spanish service, and so on. I think it's been proved recently that he's actually with a Catalan family from northern Spain. But anyway, short of doing DNA tests, I'm sure no one will ever know the truth about Columbus. But let's go back to, that goes back to the troubled situation in 700. It took the Christians 700, 800 years to reconquer Spain. But they did. That's how serious the fighting in Spain really was. A 700, 800 year struggle. Anyway, the Muslim armies were personally quite successful. And I'll draw my poor map of Spain here. Here's Spain. So here's Gibraltar here. So they came up and they absolutely went, like this. But they didn't ever conquer that area. They went bypassed it. And this was an area where Christianity remained. I forget what the name of that area is. I think it's called Galicia. There's another place here called Extremadura in Spain, in Spanish language, very hard. I don't know if that was conquered or not, but those areas were bypassed. And you can say that was a mistake the Muslim armies did, because as things settled down in Spain and those areas coalesced, the Reconquista was launched from those areas with Church Vatican help from Italy and Rome. In any case, originally the conquest went fast, as I told you. The administration was as it was. Tariq was successful at the beginning. Musa became jealous of him, fired him because he was getting all the glory, and Musa, who had initiated it as governor of North Africa, was getting none. And as I told you, then the caliph back in Damascus got jealous of Musa because he was getting too much glory and riches, and recalled him, and took all his wealth away from him when he came back to Damascus. And I think it was legended that Musa died a beggar on the streets of Damascus, or something close to a beggar. Usually, I don't know if he was treated this way. You'll have to check me out. My memory is going a bit dim, but it's probably not as bad as some of your memories. Since you don't even know about these things, probably most of you, but they often put people's eyes out to make them helpless, not a threat anymore. They didn't want to kill them, they would just blind them. I'm not sure if Musa was treated this way, but I have a dim recollection that he was. This was the gratitude he got from the caliph for all his conquests. In any case, he was recalled, and all of his wealth went to others and so on, even though he brought a lot of wealth back to Damascus. The problem with the conquest, as I told you already, it was so fast that to administer such an empire was almost impossible, really difficult. And by the 800s, things started to break down, as I will show you. And the administration was not, you didn't have the communications, radio, roads, things like that. It would take, what would it take to ride a horse from Spain to Damascus? I mean, it probably could take you like 6 weeks or something if you were lucky, maybe 3 months or something. I don't know how long it would take. So it was really almost impossible to administer an empire of that consequence. I should deal, before I go back to the fall of the Umayyad Empire, these were its most famous conquests, Spain. By the way, and in the conquest of Spain, a lot of Arab tribesmen followed the armies. So a lot of tribes from northern and southern Arabia followed the armies, and this northern Arabian, southern Arabian tribal ethos actually moved into Spain. So there were towns in Spain that were settled by tribes with a southern Arabian loyalty and a northern Arabian loyalty. Remember we read that thing about the bird's nest? Ultimately that was the Kais versus Kal tribal feud that started, according to the writers, over a bird's nest. So these Kais-Kal animosities, I'm a Kais, you're a Kal, I'm a southerner, you're a northerner, Kal being the southerners, Kais being the northerners, actually divided the settlers in Spain too. So there'd be certain towns that would be Kais, certain towns that would be Kal.